Rome is an interesting scene. It's an ecclesiastical city, and you soon learn when you've been there a while that in Rome there's a real gossip that goes on. And it's a clerical gossip. That's the distinction in Rome. You have other cities where you have political gossip and things like that, but Rome is a city of clerical gossip. And what you also find is that you have these sources of power that are not obvious to the person who's not familiar with Rome, and after a time you realize these people have power and they come to the fore. Frequently we would have this said to us, that some people are saying, reports are saying, and you'll say, well, who are these others? Who are these other sources? And where are these reports coming from? And that was, so you had a typical expert, a self-proclaimed expert in Rome, a person who'd been there a while, who knew a lot about the Vatican, and would say, I have my sources. And you had a lot of these people, and the one who had the best sources was the one who was cock of the walk. So they would start trying to predict and say, my sources tell me that. So you had a lot of people talking about the Society of Jesus and saying, this is going to happen and this is why that's going on. A number of them were saying that the Pope was very dissatisfied with the Arrupe line. Not just Pedro Arrupe, but the Arrupe line. So that when he did what he did, wrote those letters that he wrote, and acted as he did, he was not just trying to remove Arrupe from power, he was just trying to put an end to the Arrupe line. And there's something to that. What was the Arrupe line? We used to deny, that there was an Arrupe line, or that there was a cult of Arrupe. Arrupe hated that. But the idea was that Arrupe's way of guiding the society had been very open, it had been inspirational, it had been charismatic, but there'd been a great sharing of things. And people were encouraged to speak up. And Arrupe had his way of going about things. For example, the Latin American provincials sent a letter to Father Arrupe, and they said, Father Arrupe, we'd like your advice on whether we could use, or a person could use, what is known as the Marxist analysis. The Marxist analysis was an economic explanation of the situation, and it explained the current situation in economic terms. It did not accept the Marxist ideology, but it just made use of this one, what we would call this economic theory. So what did Arrupe do? He got together a group of experts. He put one man in charge of the investigation, and he got a whole body of opinion from experts on Latin American ideologies and in the Marxist system. And after getting all those opinions and discussing it with us as general assistants, he got out a letter. He wrote a famous letter on not using the Marxist analysis. He got that out in a letter in December, and this was so good that Civiltà Cattolica, which is a publication every 2 weeks done by Italian Jesuits, they asked if they could publish it. This was an extraordinary thing because it was only Italian Jesuits who would write for that, and it was a semi-official document of the Vatican. Well, Casaroli was the Secretary of State, and he said, well, he couldn't take responsibility for this. The Pope himself had to be consulted. And they asked the Pope, could this be published, this letter of Arrupe on not using the Marxist analysis, could that be published in Civiltà Cattolica? And the Pope said yes, which was a real coup. So this letter got tremendous coverage. So this was a sign that Arrupe really had something to say. And then, as I say, it was in to see his method of procedure. He didn't just talk off the top of his head. He consulted. And this was not the Vatican way of doing things. You always got the impression this came right from the Pope. The Pope didn't say, well, I'm consulting this. No. But Arrupe was very clear about it. He said, I'm saying this because I've consulted the experts. So his approach was different, and he used that as general. And it was in contrast to what the normal Vatican way of proceeding was. You weren't known publicly to be consulting others. No, this came right out of nowhere. So that was an important point to make. So anyhow, we have these two great visions of the society of Jesus. The one saying it's disastrous, the other saying no. What you have now in the whole faith justice approach is simply articulating for today what the formula of our institute said back in 1540, and there's where people took a stand and where they rose or fell. Who were some of these voices that were influencing the Pope, that he apparently was listening to? Well, there were a number of them. One who is especially mentioned is a cardinal today. His name is Eduardo Martinez Somalo, Spanish. He had been what we call the sustituto, the substitute Secretary of State, which is equivalent in American usage to the chief staff person, the one who organizes the what's to be discussed and gets the documents out and all that. He has a very important position. He had held that position, and some people said, well, how come he, as a Spaniard, had so much influence? And the cardinal told us that, a Spanish cardinal. He said, I looked into that, and I found out that this great friend of the Pope, Pope John Paul II, is a Polish cardinal by the name of Descour, Andrzej Descour, who was the Pope's closest confidant. I think I mentioned, if I don't, I mention it now. Back when, in 1978, when they were holding elections to elect a new Pope, Cardinal Descour had promoted the candidacy of Cardinal Wojtyła. He had been the one who knew him so well, and he would explain to people why Karol Wojtyła had all the qualities